Hello and welcome to the post-match reaction to the Blues versus the Hurricanes. Not the best game of Super Rugby, Aotearoa, let's be honest, but an important one for the Blues to get that win after a couple of games where they've lost, and plenty of controversy in this one, let's be honest. And I don't think the commentators really helped things much along the way. To be honest, not being very good at explaining some of the things that were going on in that game. But hey, that's what it is. I'm Paul. I'll be your host today here on New Zealand Sports Radio as we go through, as we have a quick chat about Blues versus Hurricanes that finished 27-17. Don't forget, these shows go live on YouTube, Facebook, and Twitter. And you can get most of our shows available also as podcasts as well, just such New Zealand Sports Radio. As you can see in the ticker down there, we've got the score 27-17. It finished. The Blues just managed to get that penalty kick on the buzzer so that the Hurricanes miss out on a losing bonus point. We had another grandstand finish, as we've had in all the games this weekend. But this one really was not a classic. In the first half, we had the yellow card for Kirifi, as both sides essentially messed things up and just their own errors stopping them from getting points in this one. And we ended up with that yellow card on 16 minutes for Kirifi, who went in on Terry Black at a clean-out. Terry Black not really doing anything at the ruck, and Kirifi catching him high, at which point, let's be honest, the referees are going to go to a card. And was it a particularly nasty one? No, it wasn't, but he was reckless, and this is what they're trying to stamp out, folks. So if they're going to try and stamp it out, this is the kind of thing they're going to do. And it did mean we didn't see much of that kind of stuff for the rest of the game. They've got to say, look, the Canes really did managed that 10 minutes very, very well and came out 3-0 ahead, whereas the Blues, again, their own worst enemies. They had platforms like scrums, etc., but would just knock on the ball there. And I've just realised I'm in a kind of a yellow T-shirt, by the way. This is my Gabs T-shirt. I'm actually a Blues fan, which is the jersey over there. Anyway, but let me bring in Stephen Harris at this point. I'll try and bring him in. There he is. How are you doing, sir?
Very good. Thank you, Paul. Once again, great to be on the show.
And look, as a Blues fan, it's going to be, mission done, but not particularly happy with the performance, I guess.
Yeah, it's interesting what you mentioned about the Canes managing those both those cards, and I thought they did that extremely well. But I'd also say during the time, I think the Blues were their own worst enemy, making a lot of unforced errors. Dropping passes and not quite accurate at the breakdown. There were a few breakdown penalties that they conceded, just not getting cleaners there quick enough. But also some good work from the Hurricanes. And you thought, well, maybe the longer this game goes, I must admit, at the halftime break, I actually thought the Canes were well in this game. They would have been the happier team going into the halftime break.
Yeah, absolutely. I mean, they were only a point down, 10-9, having been missing a player for half the game at that point. The two yellow cards. We'll have a quick chat about the Ireland yellow card in a second. And look, they had 60% possession, 65% territory in that first half, and used Geordie's boot. Now, when you think that two of his kicks were like 50-odd meters out, you've got to say, for all that territory and possession, they didn't get much for it because those two kicks were a long way out, but they took them at the right times when during those yellow cards. So it was the right thing to do there. I also think that, and there were some questions by the commentators who I thought were poor tonight, but around the Blues, taking that 3 before half time, I thought it was the right option, especially after they've, at the very beginning of the game, early in the game, they went line out maul and failed. Sure, they got the second line out maul, got the penalty try from it, but it's far from a sure thing. I think taking those 3 points was the right decision at that point.
Yeah, I agree with you, because if you recall, they had just pretty much conceded 3 points earlier, and then really they were really gimme points that they basically gave away, and it was a case of just getting those 3 points back. Although I'm saying that the Hurricanes grabbed them right back on halftime.
Yeah, they did. So let's talk about that period and around that penalty try. So first off, Kirifi gets penalised for a turnover at the ruck, and look, his right elbow is on the ground. And if your right elbow's on the ground, you're clearly not supporting your weight. Sure, it's his left hand that's doing all the work on the ball, and therefore the commentators might not have been looking at it, but they were very poor in saying, "Oh, yeah, it all looks good." But nah, he went off his feet.
Oh, listen, based on what we've seen, based on what we've what we've seen in a lot of the other games, it was either going to be a penalty or a yellow card. So I would not have been surprised either way, Paul. But the yellow card, that pretty much comes under all the sort of parallels or specifications that they.
Oh yeah, no, not the yellow cards, but the penalty that led to the kicks to the corner, which led to the yellow card. The commentators were going, "Oh, I don't see why he's been penalised for that. It looks like a good steal." It's only a good steal if you're allowed to put your elbow on the ground. And then we had the line out more. Now, if you can look on screen, folks, I'm taking a screen grab and look. Taking screen grabs doesn't tell you the whole story. I understand that. So people are going to say that. But look, what you can see here is that down here, Ardie Surveyor's knee is on the ground, whereas the ball carrier is still on his feet. And that is why the referees have called it collapsing by Ardie Surveyor, as he's got his weight on the player, not on his own feet. Therefore, it's called collapsing.
Yeah,
it's got nothing to do with how he got there. He got there absolutely legally, which is what all the Sky commentators wanted to talk about. But that's why the call went the way it did.
Yeah, I realise these commentators they want to see a contest, and last night we saw a great upset, which was great for the competition. But we also want to see the right decisions, and if you see that snapshot there, boy, that just blows any sort of contentious argument right the heck out of the water. Right there, he's on his knees, because if he's actually on his feet, he probably doesn't stop that pull. He doesn't drag the player. The Blues had that momentum at the time. So listen, it's it's perfectly right.
I'm happy to say it was a bit 50-50 around the Blues player could have been diving for the line and going down anyway. Sure, maybe, but at the end of the day, that's why the call was made. And some of these will go one way, some of these go the other way. This time went that way. There's some talk was also mentioned around my tweet around this saying, look at those Blues players who have detached and clearing out. Well, they were attached until Ardie Surveyor detached them by grabbing the ball player. So they were part of it until then. But that explains why the call was made. Now you can disagree or agree with the call, but that's why it was happening. Then the other one is like, well, that's a bit harsh to be a penalty try and a yellow card. Well, look, the reason it isn't about how egregious the penalty is. It's about, would the player probably have scored if that penalty hadn't happened? And the answer is yes. If you take Ardie Surveyor out of that situation, he scores that try. So a try was probably scored. So it was the right call once you've made that decision to go for the penalty try and the yellow card. So that explains that, folks. I say really poor comms from Sky this evening, being unable to explain why the call was even made, which is a shame, because that then leads the whole conversation on Twitter and Facebook follows those commentators, because they think that everyone believes that they know what they're talking about, and unfortunately, that's so. I think they've got a bit more responsibility than they're taking there.
Paul, and I agree with you. I think they need to be held to account as well. You just got the impression they all of a sudden started questioning a lot of the decisions that were being made. There's the one thing you get with Pickerel. Pickerel will always give a lot of penalties away, and he's very finicky on the breakdown. And you could have justifiably seen some penalties given against a team that were in possession of the ball, but he actually penalised guys in the ruck area. So he put a line in the sand straight away. If you're going to get in there and try and get that turnover, make sure you're not in that tackle ball area. And I think on a couple of occasions, he penalised the Blues in and around that area, and he did something very, very similar. In fact, it actually came from the touch judge call, because he originally penalised the Blues, and the touch judge basically said, "No, you got that round the wrong way," and he actually turned it around. He turned it around the other way. And I suppose that's sometimes you just start shrugging your shoulders and thinking, "Boy, are they getting it right?" I do believe the Blues, just with their own ill discipline and the mistakes they were making, I think they were actually keeping the Canes in that game. They'd been a lot more accurate while the Canes were down. 2 yellow cards. I think they could have put that game away at halftime.
Oh, they should have done, but they didn't. Look, also, we're talking about the referee here, but there were only nine penalties each, so both in single figures. The referee didn't get as involved.
No.
Okay, he made some big decisions on those two cards, but he didn't get that involved. I think this was down to the reason it was a scrappy game wasn't down to him excessively blowing. The reason it was a scrappy game was because the teams in that first half just couldn't put more than 3 phases together. It didn't help also that both of them lost 2 lineouts. Both the Blues lost 2 scrums. If you haven't got a platform from your set piece, it's also difficult to play as well, which didn't help things either.
Yeah, and that played its part in the last 15 minutes. The Blues scrum was very dominant, apart from one weird one where they had the dominance. But on saying that, they collapsed it from their side, so it was probably the right decision by Pickerel at the time. They were going for the scrum penalty, but they didn't keep it up. So that's why he penalised the Blues at the time, was getting a few texts. Gee, how come the dominant scrum is the scrum that gets penalised? You've still got to keep your scrum up. It's a little bit like, how can I explain it? It's a little bit like screwing the scrum. Like you've got a dominant scrum and you screw it to one side, or you don't keep it square, you get penalised. So that was probably the right decision at the end of the day.
Now, come the second half, and the reason that the Blues won this one was in that sort of first 20 odd minutes is that they were more patient with the ball. They weren't trying to spread it as wide, which meant they weren't making as many mistakes. The pods were working well. We were seeing the tip on quite a lot from the players. And so that the Blues really were keeping the ball tighter and therefore not losing the ball as much, essentially. And they got through their phases, and that led to their scores after Ruru obviously gave away 3 penalties. But Ruru got over the line and got held up. He must have gone about 3 or 4 runs in that in that period, which really showed that the Hurricanes' defence was clearly sliding early, which meant going wide was a bad option.
Yeah, and I think he actually, to give Jonathan Ruru, he's a much maligned player, but to be fair, he actually really added when he came on. Not that I didn't think Sam not played too badly, but probably a couple of poor high kicks early in the second half pretty much sealed his face. Hence, Ruru came into the game early, and I actually think he really added something on just with his difference. And I see Nocturnal Rights is obviously, you must be a mind reader as well because you're reading my mind at the minute. Nocturnal, I agree. He just started running a little bit, and he just started to keep that Hurricanes defence guessing. But listen, the try that I really enjoyed was the Talia try, because there was a lot of good work. It came from a line-out turnover from Tom Robinson. And listen, the skipper, congratulations to Tom Robinson, first up, 100%. Can't argue with that. But he needed to start leading by example in the second half, and I think he did that. All of a sudden, you started seeing him being a little bit more involved. And there were, leading up to that try, he put in 4 really good, accurate cleanouts. And when you get really good, accurate cleanouts, well, nobody's going to, that's quick ball. It's there on a plate. And he did that really well. And that was a really, really good, a good bit of continuity there for the Blues.
Now, you mentioned there about Tom Robinson being captain. Now, I'm sorry, look, nothing against the guy. I think he's a cracking player. But how does someone who isn't in your starting lineup up until this point suddenly become captain when your captain's not available? That shows that there's a serious lack of leadership in this Blues team.
This is interesting, Paul. I did a bit of digging during the week, and I asked that question. Now, apparently in the preseason games, the Blues used 2 squads, and he was one of the leaders of one of the squads. So he's actually seen as one of the leaders in the squad, and he was always going to captain the team at some stage. But I do, like you, I think it's a bit weird, especially when you consider Josh Goodhue is a former skipper of Northland. I think Alex Hodgman is captain Auckland at Mitre 10 level as well. Or formerly Mitre 10. I'm not sure what they call it these days. Bunnings, I think Bunnings NPC. But yeah, it was one of those ones that came out of the blue. But when I heard the rationale behind it. I thought, well, I'd kind of run with it. But yeah, he sort of does come across as a bit of a rebel, but he strikes me more as a lead by example type of player, Paul.
I've got no problems with him being named captain. I just find it strange that a player who's not a first choice player suddenly becomes captain because your captain is not available. So that's why I found it strange. And the fact that they announced it on April 1st really had viewers going, is this true? Is it not? Is this true? Are they April Foolsing us here with who their captain is?
Well, I was about to say, Paul, wasn't it the same day that they came out with Sam Cane having a long-term injury as well?
That one isn't, unfortunately.
Unfortunately, it's just unfortunately.
I did have some question marks as well that was actually true or not. He was he had a cracking game today. And you say Rieko Ioane also got outside his man there and let the ball go. Now, one of the criticisms of Rieko has been, look, he has got the pace, he can get outside a player, but as a 13, you need to straighten it up, because what you're doing when you get outside that player is you're eating all the space up for the winger. This time he just got outside the player and released the ball quickly and did the right thing. But it's one of those ones where he can't do that too often. He is doing it a lot, and I think he needs to straighten up and try and get the inside shoulder rather than the outside shoulder occasionally, or more often, to create that space for his wingers, because he is eating it up quite a lot at the moment. Nocturnal writes, hope Carl's knee is okay. Yeah, that looked bad, and he's had knee issues in the past as well, which restricted his, which why he was a late bloomer, was because of knee injuries, and spent a lot of time having to do a lot of work with unweighting his legs. Let's hope that's not too serious. I totally agree.
Well, I suppose this is where you need that depth in the front row, Paul, and when you've got the likes of Tuangafasi and Hodgman and Nepo Lala, and of course James Lay, who started as the tight head prop at the top of the season. That's where your depth really counts big time.
Yeah, absolutely. That meant a 24-12 lead with about 16 minutes to go. And the commentators were like, 6 minutes to go. Oh, the clock's starting to be a problem for the Canes. No, the clock was a problem from way earlier than that. They needed to score quicker. Princep did bash over eventually, but it was all becoming a little bit too little, too late. It was going to be we had that outside chance of a golden having to go to golden points if they managed to get that converted try to even things up, but they were leaving it too late, really. Lots of you'll say Akira Ioane did well to hold up the player at the end there, but he really shouldn't have allowed himself to get caught in the back of a scrum before that. So a bit of rocks and diamonds from Akira today, but I don't think he was the only one by any stretch of the imagination. It was just his were just very very obvious. I think a lot of players were rocks and diamonds today.
Yeah, well, I was about to say, Paul, that somebody stole Caleb Clark this year, because it's like somebody. It doesn't even seem like he's the same player that we saw, running around in Super Rugby this time last year.
Well, apart from him touching the ball out and dropping it over the line, I actually can't remember him doing anything in this game. Really, he has been absolutely anonymous in this season. We talk about second season syndrome, but this is particularly has been particularly poor for him, unfortunately.
Yeah, listen, a player who doesn't get a lot of love, but I thought he was good again tonight, was Perofeta. Before he left the field, listen, he's having a very, very solid season. So I thought he was very good. I thought Mark Talia was a little bit better than what we've seen from Talia this year. Thrown in with the odd mistake, and I also thought Hosking Satutu has probably been better than what we've seen this year as well, Paul. And I think we spoke about this last week with the Chiefs game. You've got to have guys. You've got to have at least several guys that are standing up. And I think if you look at this game tonight, I think it was quite a messy game, simply because not many guys from both sides actually stood up during this contest. Excuse me, I'm just putting a battery charger on.
That's all good. Look, folks, we're more subdued in this post-match reaction. That gives you an idea as to what the game was like. It was a hard game to get into and to actually enjoy. To be honest, I didn't help my daughters with watching a movie next to me, but even so, this was a hard game to concentrate on because it was so bitty. Now, look, the Blues have done what they needed to do, which is get the win. They obviously they would have liked to have had a try bonus point, but that late try stopped that. The important point was they got the win, and they got there in the end. That's the that's the thing they can take out of this. After losing 2 on the bounce, they needed this win, however which way they could get it. Was it pretty? No. Can they play better? Absolutely. We've seen them play a lot better. But enough players stood up and did enough good things to see them home, even though they all did some bad things as well. I think that's pretty much the story from this one. Unfortunately for the Hurricanes, they just appear to be, as Nocturne rightly said, the Hurricane attack is just failing to really spark. They've got some good backs there, but they just don't seem to be able to put them together. It's harsh to call it on the 9 and 10, but those are the guys that are supposed to be able to launch the back line and run that back line, and they just don't have any experience in those 2 positions, and I think that's hurting them the whole way through. Geordie Barrett stepped up and had a big game last weekend and got the win. He was here as well in this one, but just couldn't control the game enough from the fullback, and he needs some help. He can't do it all himself. And you look around the rest of the back line, there are no playmakers. There's hard runners, there's hard workers, but there's no playmakers, and he needs help. And until they find that, I think they're going to struggle, unfortunately. Sure, they'll get the odd game where he does absolutely dominate, but it's going to be the odd game. It's not going to be a consistent thing.
Yeah, they never really got on the outside of the Blues tonight as well, Paul. So something, maybe it was falling down around that midfield area. I'm not 100% sure. I'd have to really look at the game again and study it. But probably their wingers were reasonably dangerous tonight. I mean, it's a good break there from Julian Savea, and Rayasi, showed how strong he is. That's probably the biggest back three in this competition, for crying out loud. And you've got to say they were pretty underutilized.
That's what I was going to have a quick look at. I mean, runs 8 by Barrett, 6 by Savea, and 8 by Rayasi, which is actually more than the corresponding people from the Blues. But only 5 passes by Barrett. When you think Ledger had 15, and you think as your second playmaker, I'd have thought, and see him get a bit more involved than that, really. None of them. I mean, Julian Savea, obviously, with that one break, made 53 meters, which is not a lot, let's be blunt, but he actually made the most out of anybody in the game. So no one really had a good game from that point of view. Defenses were on top. Tackling in this game was very good. And obviously very, very few missed tackles. I thought Dane Coles had a pretty good game. He's one of those leaders in the Hurricanes that does need to step up and have his personality kept shining through. He actually missed 3 tackles, which is most of anybody. But I did think he was very noticeable, very active, which he needs to be for this side. I think we're probably there, aren't we?
Yeah. Oh, listen, a couple of good. Just a shout out for Isaiah Walker-Leawede as well. I thought he was really good when he came off the bench and just gave the Hurricanes just a little bit more go forward and a little bit more drive. But the problem is for the Hurricanes has just been that set piece, and it's not going to go away in a hurry, and it's something that they're going to have to address if they need to stay in this competition. That was a really important win for the Blues tonight, Paul. It just puts them up to 14 points. They'll be kicking themselves for their last minute faux pas last weekend against the Chiefs, because after the Crusaders losing last night, I think they might have been sitting nicely tucked under 17 or 18 points just behind the Crusaders. So they go into a bye next week, so it's going to be an interesting couple of weeks with I think the Highlanders have got the Chiefs next week. Stand to be corrected, and then they host the Blues at home. So 2 real big weekends coming up for both the Highlanders and also the Blues. Those are 2 teams I see in contention.
Yep, very true. Actually, also a hat tip to AJ Lamb. Congratulations on his debut for the Blues, coming off the bench. Made his 1 tackle that he had to, and didn't touch the ball. But never mind. Hopefully another time AJ will get to run with the ball. But hey, at least he got on the pitch, and he's now his first cap. So congratulations, AJ, on that one. Dalton Papali'i was big and then disappeared a bit. I'm not sure where he went, but he became much quieter in the game. I think 15 tackles. I think he got wrapped up in making lots of tackles in the second half, so not available for doing as much running. He was the top tackler by quite some distance with that one. So thank you very much, Stephen, for joining me. Don't forget, folks, next up there is the Reds versus the Rebels. And now remember, the Rebels really did a number on the Reds, or pushed the Reds all the way previously. So let's see if they can do it again. I'm pretty sure that's the game that it is. I'm running this from memory. So that's coming up in about 20 minutes. So, folks, don't forget to watch that one. We'll be back at 8 p.m. tomorrow evening with the Super Rugby Review Show. We'll review all 4 of the games. Thank you very much, Stephen, and have a great weekend.
Cheers, Paul.